Hear this. So weird.
Marjorie?
Sorry.
It's okay.
Was having some audio issues, so I'm fooling around with
Gotcha.
my mic. Sorry about that.
It's okay. See you on Tuesday.
Yes, yay.
Now that you said that, Laura, I'm coming over Monday night.
Correct.
Guess I should rent a car.
Maybe.
Or just keep the one I'm in now.
I sent you a text if you hadn't seen it. Maybe take a quick look. Please.
Are you talking about the one you sent about the environmental call?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I did see it.
Perfect.
I'm at Feely, and Joey was doing to open up the program, was doing kind of a recap of PE days because he didn't really get a chance to talk to the group, when the meetings are over. And
Mm-hmm.
that recap turned into a full-blown legislative update. So I get to do it twice this morning.
There you go.
Good morning, everyone. Go ahead
Good
and get
morning.
started.
Good morning.
Looks like we have a pretty decent sized group. So, as usual, we'll start off with transportation. Again, the big one there, or one of the big ones, is the dock stamp bill, House Bill 5501. There was some action with that this past week. The House has completely passed that. Now, this is the one with the $466 million hit on the Transportation Trust Fund. And sorry, something popped up on my phone. And so what happened is the House has completely passed that bill. They sent it over to the Senate. The Senate took it up yesterday in committee and amended the bill with a strike all amendment, which is just a term they use that you take all the language out of the bill and put whatever you want in there. And so they did. They struck all of the language from the bill and didn't add anything to it. So in effect, they're sending the House back a blank piece of paper. And that just sets up, the conference committee stuff, which we've been talking about, throughout the session, that, it'll be discussed and there'll be a decision made on that, in the coming weeks. The budget negotiations will start this next week and probably continue up through the end of the session. They do have the rule where they have to give 72 hours notice of the budget, meaning they have to have the budget ready for everyone to review. So that would occur earlier in the week after next. So next week's going to be big for this bill. And like I say, nobody's getting along. There's a lot of rumors about the budget right now. I've heard everything from, the governor's going to red ink it, because he's got line item veto power in the budget, all the way up to he's just going to veto the whole budget and make them come back. And so we will see what happens with that. JW, have you learned anything new in your travels this week?
Not related to this, Alan. We have done some member reach out on both the House and the Senate, just basically saying what a really bad idea this was. I did speak with Representative Bill Connerly, the one PE in the legislature, and his comment to me was, "This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of." So I'm sure the membership is reaching out to him for his viewpoint, and hopefully he's conveying that, at least on behalf of the engineers.
All right. Any other questions or comments about the bill? All right. We'll keep you posted. Hold on. Need to get to this one. All right. Then we got 1397. See where. So that's passed. That's passed now. All of its committees, it appears, and would be ready for action on the floor of the House. This is the FDOT's bill. We learned this week that the airports had some problems with this bill. Some of that's been fixed or is going to be fixed. I understand the smaller airports, still have some problems with it. In the whole, I don't think that's the reason that this bill might be in trouble, but there's a lot of talk from different groups involved, ports, seaports, airports, and others in the transportation arena, and then that they don't think this bill's actually going to make it. If it does, that'll simply be part of the political spat that's going on between the governor and the two leaders of the legislature. That it looks like maybe all of the agency bills will go down. These all being governor's agencies, so we'll just have to keep an eye. But it is ready to go, so they have it postured correctly. If they would make a deal, the one thing that's weird about this session, and it's true to an extent in any session, but they've got so much stuff right now that's held up that all of it really is fodder for the negotiations. It doesn't necessarily have to be budget related. You know, they can horse trade anything when they get in those negotiations. One can say, well, I need this money for, you know, whatever they wanting to do, and the other side says, well, you know, I want my, you know, dock stamp bill, or, you know, whatever the case may be. So all of these are a lot of the bills that I have on both of these reports, you know, may in fact be in trouble, but all of them could be part of the negotiation process. So I leave them all on there. Same would be with, you know, Senate Bill 1662. That's the companion bill. I didn't have an update when I put my report together yesterday. I'm actually at the Feely session in St. Augustine. When I put that together yesterday, it said it was on the calendar for Appropriations Committee yesterday. I assume it passed through, or they wouldn't have put it on there. But I'll get that updated. I don't know if John or Derek, if somebody's on the phone that might know.
It did pass, Alan.
Did it? Okay. I figured it would. Like I said, they wouldn't put it on the agenda if they weren't going to do it. So both bills then are poised to, you know, go to the floor in both chambers. With 2 weeks left, that's plenty of time. It's just some of the other stuff going on that, you know, might be the reason that people are saying they don't think the bill's going to pass.
Hey, Alan, it's Melissa. Those two bills aren't matching up yet. So do we know which version is most likely to move forward if one does pass?
No, and that's part of the issue as well. And thanks for bringing that up, Melissa. That's a big part of the issue, is that the bills aren't the same. So obviously, each side is wanting something the other side doesn't necessarily like. You know, so they'll have to make it. It sounds to me like there's going to be a deal made here somewhere. They're going to take some stuff out, or one chamber's going to add some stuff in and try to get them. You know, they have to be, you know, virtually identical. When they pass, you know, one chamber could just, you know, if they make a deal, could lay their bill on the table and take up the other side's bill before it goes to the governor. But yeah, that's all part of this. That's why people are starting to say, you know, and FDOT's bill always becomes a train. They start moving and everybody's trying to add their stuff on it, and it weighs down the bill, and a lot of times they have trouble getting them passed. So that is part of this equation. Trying to get that done. So, and again, you know, they'll discuss this during the budget conferences and the conference to get it, see if they can get something agreed to. Okay, FTBA's bill in the Senate. It's on the second reading calendar, which means it's gone to the floor. Doesn't look like it's been scheduled yet. It passed about 10 days ago out of its last committee in the Senate. So wouldn't surprise me a bit if that's one of the ones they're holding up. And then 567. Hold on 1 second. That one is in its last committee. It still needs to be heard by the Commerce Committee. It went there on the 10th of April. So again, you know, 8 days ago. And so we'll just, you know, keep an eye on that. I would expect it'll come up. I would say they'll get both of these bills lined up for passage, but then it's a matter of, you know, I believe these bills are very similar to each other. So that's a good thing for FTBA. But we'll just have to see this week. The House still needs to get it through one committee. That's kind of where we're at as far as transportation. Anybody has any questions or comments, or have heard something different than we've heard, you know, please speak up. All right, Laura, we'll switch over. Okay, the one that seems to be, I was telling Laura before the call started that I'm here at Feely and Joey was doing just a recap of PE days, and it turned into a full-blown legislative update, and this is 1461 in particular is of great interest to everybody. Not a surprise, but that bill is also in the Commerce Committee. I just went there about 3 days ago. And I should have said at the beginning, this has been a short week for the legislature. They're gone now. Most of them, there were a couple of committees that met yesterday, but most of them have left for the Easter holiday. So they'll be back on Monday. But the 1461 is now in its last committee. And I certainly expect this will pass. Kind of where we're at is we've talked to them earlier in the week. We thought we had ourselves in pretty good shape. The sponsor of the bill had told us that that we were good and that he would like to see all, the regulatory boards and licensing boards and all that. He'd like to see them all operate the way that FEMIC and FBPE do. However, there's a couple other members of the House, Esposito and Buchanan in particular, that are really behind this bill. And the ones that, are more in a leadership role, they came back late this week and said, or earlier this week, and said that they still wanted to do something. And they were talking about combining the Board of Professional Engineers with FEMIC so that it would be one entity. That still presents some problems. What we're trying to get them to understand is they keep saying things like, 80% of the work gets done by DBPR. And, we're like, well, that might be true when you talk about all the professions and occupations that are licensed under DBPR, because DBPR does a lot of the administrative work, for a bunch of those boards. We're not like that. And FEMIC sits in the role of DBPR, and then you have the actual board. And so DBPR isn't doing anything for us. It's all done, with these two organizations, and it's kind of we're trying to drive that point home that, this doesn't make sense. We know ours works and is the most efficient board out there because, they've been operating on the same amount of money since 1997. They've never gotten any more money than they did in their original appropriation. And, they've gone from 26 employees down to 12. They're making do with what they have. And they do so very efficiently, but they're getting to the point where, it's going to be hard for them to do what they need to do. So saying that, I'll go ahead and bring this up. Please don't hold this, you'll think this is a done deal by any stretch, but at the same time, we're having this discussion about whether these two entities even exist anymore. We're also negotiating with the House and Senate to get them more money. So it's going to be interesting to see how this turns out. I know I've worked with Zana quite a bit this week to get information from them about their budgets, where they would spend this money, all kinds of sort of internal data that the folks, especially in the House, are asking for. So it's a possibility we're going to be able to save it and get them more money. But, we'll just have to wait and see. On the Senate side, you can look at Senate Bill 1452. It hasn't moved. It's, it was referred to committee, and that was the last thing that ever happened with that bill was March the 10th. So they have, told us multiple times that, they have no interest in this bill, that they would be interested in holding some workshops around the state in the summer to discuss deregulation. But they have no interest in this bill. Again, in the background is always everything's on the table when they start negotiating. So the House, I think, is going to pass their bill here probably this coming week and get it on the floor and out. And, the Senate's sitting on the other side and will not have done anything. And I don't know.
Hey,
It was very strict. Yeah, go ahead.
It's JW. I had a conversation with Derek McGee about this, and he used a term that I guess they talked to Yarkovsky about, in that FEMIC and DB or FPPE, that specifically FEMIC is privatized the functions, and privatization is a big buzzword for the Republican legislature, and that when we're talking to people about the bill, that we should probably use that approach, that, hey, the engineers are privatized. And that was what Yarkovsky's interest was, is, well, maybe we can do that with the other professions and privatize some of those functions and get them out of state government and reduce the cost to state government. So I don't know
Right.
if they conveyed that language to you or not, but
Yeah, we use that term a lot when we're talking to them, and it's this one, and I think John and Derek would say the same thing, is baffling, because this isn't a Republican posture, right? We're going to make DBPR one of the most powerful state agencies around. If going with this original language that we're going to do this with every licensing board, everything's going in under DBPR, and that's not where they've tried to go in the years past when they've tried to deregulate DBPR. It's always been an effort to get rid of DBPR. And now you're going the opposite direction. And it's almost like they've done this, tried to do something for so many years, that now it's like, we're going to do something even if it's wrong. And so we keep trying to tell them that, like, look, you send this over to DBPR, which is a bunch of bureaucrats, they're going to have to contract out for some of these services, and it's going to wind up costing you more money. And on the negotiation for more money, they don't even bat an eye. Oh, $400,000, that's it. Get us some data, and just tell us what you would do with the money. And nobody's fighting back on it. And so I think they realize how efficient FEMIC and FPPE are, but it's just caught up in this Doge stuff, and this isn't even Doge. If you look at what they're doing at the federal level and a lot of the state stuff, they're after the agencies themselves, and this just is not the same thing. And so we keep working on them just to get them educated on all that. But yeah, we do use that term quite a bit. And the Board of Architecture is the same way. So, and as far as I know, we're about the only two. And that was the scuttlebutt at the beginning of the session, was that's what the legislature would do, is they would kind of use us as the model and do that with a bunch of the other boards, and kind of started out that way. And then all of a sudden, when they dropped that amendment a week or two ago, it goes totally the other way. It makes no sense. So hopefully the Senate realizes that, and we'll sit on this one. Like I said, their bill hasn't moved a bit. So,
Hey, Alan, if they're
Alan.
talking about trying to do workshops around the state in the summertime, if that's the Senate's position, did they say who's going to lead putting those workshops together? Are they talking about trying to do a task force? Like, what does that look like?
we haven't gotten anything official. That was just from some of the talks our folks have had, mainly with Senate staff. Is that's what they would like to do. They haven't put any details, haven't told us any details, or given us those details. But I would envision it to be something like, they've been doing, say, with the condos, where, they'll put a panel together and travel it around the state and get comments and ideas from people. But I don't know for sure, Melissa.
All right. Well, the good news is I watched the hearing on that, and there's some heavy hitting lobbyists that are opposing it. So it might be good to have John partner with all those folks against the bill.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like this every time when they go after DBPR as a whole, and they've done it at least a half a dozen times over the last 15 years. There are some heavy hitting lobbyists that represent these various groups, and so it's going to be hard for them to get it over the finish line, I think. And we'll just see what comes out in the negotiation process, but, and we'll, be opposed to it or be for it, but we don't know what it is yet, so.
Hey, Alan. I know
Mhm.
ASC took a call to action. They just sent an email out yesterday regarding this bill 1461 to oppose it and to take action to
Mhm.
send an email to your local representatives. So,
And who did you get that request from?
from ASC Florida section,
Okay, yeah, ASCE had
I think they send it
contacted
to
me
all their
earlier.
members.
Right. They had contacted me earlier in the week, and I've been contacted by our folks up in Washington, D.C., and I've told them the same thing that I'm telling you all, that, I don't think there's any stopping that bill in the House. The Speaker wants it. It's his priority. You talk to, the rank and file members of the House on either of these big issues, either this one or the trust fund raid. And, they say, well, I hear what you're saying. It makes sense, but I'm not going to go against the Speaker. So it looks to me like
Okay.
it's going to come out of there. It's all about what the Senate does with it. And so we'll be working on the senators on the other side to try to stop this from happening. And what's your initial thought, if somebody just chime up, what's your initial thought on combining FEMIC and FBPE into one organization? Still leaves it privatized. They kind of are, they in my mind, that, I mean, legally they're two separate entities, but, one's doing the administration, one's doing, the actual disciplinary action and that kind of stuff, and approving licenses. Does anybody have an immediate reaction to that? I mean, our immediate reaction is no, don't do that, because we don't know what the consequences would be. But just, if anybody has any thoughts, feel free to email them to me or go ahead and speak up now. Like I say, whatever your reaction is, I'd like to know it. So let me go through these others real quick. The Water Management Districts bill, that's the Senate President's priority. It went over to, it's passed the full Senate, went over to the House on the 9th of April. And it's sitting over there. So that's probably, that's just another one that it appears, the House is holding it up as part of the negotiation process. 1169, the House companion, is now in its last committee. So it's in good position. If they want to do something in the House, they can, if they make an agreement with the Senate President. So we'll just have to see what comes about with that. I don't know, JW, you said you had talked to Connerly. He's the sponsor of this bill. Did he mention this bill?
Only that things were looking good. We didn't really have any discussion about specific to this.
Okay. Okay. Another one of the Senate President's priorities is this rural and urban business enterprises, called regional planning in the House. The Senate bill is actually going to be heard in its final committee next week on Monday. So that one looks like it's in pretty good shape. This is the one that our problem with it was the CCNA language related to Space Florida, but I think that's settled for us. Just keeping an eye on it, make sure nothing bad shows up in there. The difference here is on the House side, it hasn't moved. It's still in its very first committee, hasn't been heard. So that would take a little bit of doing to get that one going, but it can be done. So we'll keep an eye on it. That's one of the ones that, like I mentioned, that normally I would just take this one off the list. In a normal year, I would say this one's dead, but this isn't a normal year. And I've heard a lot of buzz about these next two, the DMS bills. I don't think either one of them is going to go. But it does have the language in it that, you know, gets rid of DEI and DBEs and all that kind of stuff. So we're watching, but neither one of those bills has moved. So I don't give it more than a 1% chance. It would take some magic to get that done. And then the last two I have here, the Senate Bill 658 has passed the full Senate. That does not have the language in it that takes away lien rights for the engineers. The House bill does, but the House bill hasn't moved. It's never gone through its first committee. So I would call that one dead too in a normal year, but I'm going to leave it on the list for now. And then let's see. The alternative plans review, that one doesn't look like it's in very good shape. It's now in regulated industries in the Senate, which is the second of 3 committees. So that one would have a ways to go to get there. And the other one has passed 2 of the 3. So there's a little more action on that one. But it was moved to the Commerce Committee over 2 weeks ago. So, you know, that might be a good sign that that one's not going to make it to the finish line either. So anyway, that's the general bills. Does anybody have any questions or other bills you might have heard about of concern? Or
Hey, Alan, you know, you mentioned that the last bill there that had the DEI language in it wasn't moving, so it's likely dead. But 1397 does repeal the 3 statutes that deal with disadvantaged contracting programs. So that kind of language is definitely positioned for passage.
yeah, and I'm aware that, you know, that's been in some of the other bills. You know, it makes a bill very controversial, and maybe, I can't say this for sure, but it may be adding to the weight of 1397. You know, but like I said, they become trains. There's a lot of stuff in there, and a lot of people are starting to say they don't think that bill's going to make it. And so we've stayed kind of neutral on that so far. But if we need to, we could put it back up before CLGR, but it's a little late in the game to go against a bill at this stage, especially one you think may not pass. But we can do it if that's what the group wants. All right. Well, we're right on 10:30, so thank you very much, everyone. And next week is sure to be an exciting week up here. So we'll talk to you next Friday.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alan.